Hi, I am Dr. Kim Sage. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I am so glad you are here. Today's video is wrapping up a series of videos this week talking about how certain types of parenting in childhood, repeated types of patterns of parents who really struggled in some regard around emotional regulation, around attunement, around reciprocity, how all of that affects the way we grow up and the way we think about ourselves and relationships and the unspoken rules that we are supposed to sort of follow to be in any kind of relationship. And what I want to share today is how all of this I've discussed this week in these videos really creates a situation where you often don't really know who you are. And so basically what has happened is that in an effort to maintain your emotional safety, you often have to minimize and bury your own feelings and longings and desires and dreams because they don't align with what that parent or parents need from you. And over time, you're also so focused, oftentimes in a very hypervigilant way or a shut down, maybe you were emotionally neglected way. You're just trying to get your needs met. Whatever you're doing, whether it's trying to rotate around that parent, trying to just take care of yourself, over time, you almost lose sight of who you are. And you don't get a chance oftentimes to nurture and develop your interests and passions and hobbies because so much of what you have in terms of resource is being focused on the childhood dynamic. And these are often kids who will say, you know what, I didn't have any real dreams about what I wanted to be. Or the dreams are very much about being famous and successful and seen. And this is before, I would say, even social media. The idea that you would be very beloved, right? There's something about that. Or the third option is you're very driven and hyper-focused on being something in a career that you thought would be accepted or would get you out of it. And it might be, but it might also be the vision that the parent had for you or your child's vision of rescue. And so I've shared, for example, that even though I always loved psychology, I watched Oprah after school every day as a young person. I was always in my, my undergraduate program. When I had an elective course, I would take classes on marriage and family and, child therapy. But my initial degree was in advertising and PR because that was the family dynamic that I thought I was just going to do. And it wasn't a passion at all, but it was just something I thought. But what I really only ever wanted was to have a family because I grew up in a very, unhealthy family as an only child. It was so important to me. I attached my entire childhood healing on having what I've often called the Martha Stewart version of a family life. I had 4 kids, you wouldn't even know I had kids. Everything was just like controlled. And then I lost, that part of the dream. And so it really has taken me many, many, many years. In fact, I still sometimes kind of fall back into that's all I ever wanted was an intact family for my own children. And then feeling that guilt of, well, because of the choices you made, you ended up recreating a similar dynamic, not the exact same. And of course, they have me, which I'm very much an imperfect parent, but I like to fully believe and I know in my heart that I'm not the parent or parents I had. And so that has been part of the problem is when you attach your entire healing to being something famous, a parent, successful, whatever, and something happens to that dynamic, even if you achieve those things, right? It's never perfect. It's not what you think it's going to be. It can really destroy any sense of that child that wanted to be healed because now the child has to figure out healing in a different way without that sort of dream or fantasy or hope or longing. And even when I had it, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And I started to realize that in it. But like all things, it can take us time. And then life created a situation where I really and truly had no other choice. And so what I want to say is that as a result of those choices, because of who I chose and because of the role I dreamt of, this perfect stay-at-home mommy, I lost myself. I'm someone who's always loved education and loved learning. And yet that was all I wanted. And I think there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's something I probably would have stayed doing until my kids were much older. But because it played out in a situation where I had a 1-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 9-year-old, I had no choice. And yet that also led me back to myself and to this field again. And so I want to say that even though all these things can happen, it can be very painful, it doesn't mean that you can't find a way to discover who you are again and to create joy and a life of meaning that maybe you wouldn't have had. I also see many people who get stuck and don't know how to take chances and don't grow and don't heal and are afraid to leave a marriage or change a job or start a new career and end up being very unhappy for their entire lives, or putting all their life into their child or their kids, and then their kids grow up and leave. You know, the truth is if you live a decently long life, a much longer relationship with your adult children than you will ever have in their childhood. It's many more years. And so for those of us who, don't have those relationships, it's a lot of years without our parents if they are, gone, or we choose to not have a relationship with them. So the point of this is that you sacrifice, and the reason why is because of enmeshment. So the enmeshed relationship with these parents often has very diffuse boundaries. There's often role reversal. You act as the parent. You're the parent's best friend. You were just dropped my phone. You were just taking care of them. And so you wake up at some point in your life and you don't know who you are. And being who you are feels very scary and triggering, because in childhood it was a threat to the parent's sense of self for you to try to separate, push back. As I've said many times, these parents don't do well with typical adolescent behaviors. They all feel really threatening. And I've said many times, I have to remind myself, I've had to over the years, even with my therapist, that these are appropriate, many of them, not always, but many of them, separation behaviors. They are supposed to be preparing for adulthood, pushing back, saying, I'm not you, I'm myself. And it's just, you want to obviously have some, I believe, some boundaries and respect around that, but sometimes they're going to push it too far. And that is what they're supposed to do. It's just a matter of you helping them understand that that strategy doesn't actually serve them, and, and look at your part in things, because sometimes the harder we push, the tighter you hold on to something, the more it will try to escape and get free. And so that's true for our sense of self. It's true for our kids, I believe. It's true for our relationships. And so that dynamic is that you have often lost who you are. And like I said, for many, many people, we go out into the world as adults wanting to heal, and we often recreate many of the same dynamics of childhood. And so we can wake up in these parts of our lives not knowing who we are. And that is actually in this course called Borderline and Narcissistic Parents, Healing and Dealing with Your Trauma. But no matter where you are, whether you check out my course or not, I also have one on remothering yourself and healing that little inner child and inner parent. I want to share with you just one page, though, from the flagship course, which is an exercise I created called Who Am I? And basically what I'm asking you to do is to write out and challenge yourself questions like, what do I value? What are my strengths? What am I afraid of? What am I hoping for? What fills me up? What hurts me? You'd be surprised how many people can face an exercise like this and not necessarily know, even to write, to respond to, what are my strengths or what brings me joy. And so a lot of the work, especially if you had a really complicated childhood, wherever you find it, is to work on rebuilding and establishing boundaries, sense of self, who you are, what makes you who you are, who you want to grow into, because so much of the time we never have the space or ability to develop that. So if this is you, I would encourage you to do some identity work, to look at, creating maybe some journal responses that talk about, what are my favorite things? What do I hate? What do I love? What are my favorite foods? In many of John Bradshaw's books on the inner child, he has some exercises on those too. I have also some more of those in my course, but you can Google them, right? How to find a sense of self online. But the bottom line is that you are worthy of knowing who you are. And until you know who you are, you don't even begin to understand what you have to offer yourself and the world and those you love and relationships, careers, all of it. And I truly believe that some of the most beautiful, compassionate, creative, talented, brilliant humans are often these sort of buried diamonds in the rough, right? Because we had to spend so much of this beautiful energy we had trying to just survive. but hopefully you can find yourself in a place today, or work towards a place today, where you're not just in survival mode, where you are allowed to breathe and look around and create a life that is truly a life that you, I don't want to say that, oh, like you love your life every moment, because I don't think that's true. But I think that when you're in moments of gratitude, you can and step back and say, you know what, it may not be the life I envisioned, but if this is all it ever is, I'm pretty good. And I want to be grateful for the things I have given myself. I oftentimes look at my tiny little beach house by the beach and think it is not the vision I had, but as a child, I long to live near the ocean. And I can see it every single day of my life. And yes, my house is like this, right? But it brings me so much joy, and it is a home that I bought for myself. And at times I forget that, right? And we're always comparing to what we don't have. And yeah, it's pretty small compared to the life I envisioned, or the life that I even actually used to have. But I wouldn't go back and trade what I had to sacrifice in myself, all the parts I had to bury to have that Martha Stewart vision of my life, because also that's an illusion and not real. It never was real, but I didn't know that. So I hope you will use this time, this video, to think about who are you, and to really honor the parts of you that you want to heal, that you want to work on, and the parts that you can just say, you know what, you made it. You're a survivor, and I value that about you. I see that that part of you is important and matters, and don't forget about it when you're focusing on all the things that you don't yet have or haven't yet healed. So, thank you so much for being here. Please stay safe and well. Have a lovely weekend, and I will see you Monday. Take care. Bye.